I am Brad Keelor. She is Sarah Morton Rupert. Find out next on Director's Cut about her void detection project and how she spent 2 weeks in a tunnel. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Director's Cut. My name is Brad Keelor. I'm the director of the Geo-Institute, and that is why we call this show Director's Cut. Every single week, except in the summer and 1 week at the holidays, I sit down with a GI member who has stories to tell. Some of them are personal, some are professional, but yes, you know it by now, all of them are fun. If you don't know anything about the Geo-Institute, well, of course, shame on you. But after you get over that feeling, head on over to geoinstitute.org. There you will find out that we are a technical society with about 12,000 members, most of whom are geotechnical engineers and or geologists, and we are part of the American Society of Civil Engineers. If you like what you see today, and I feel strongly that you will, you should click like, subscribe, and get notifications. And if you do those things, we will let you know every time we post something to the YouTube channel. With all of those things out of the way, it's time for what you came here for. Here from the Mountain Time Zone, from Denver, Colorado, where she is a geophysicist with the United States Bureau of Reclamation. It is Sarah Morton Rupert. Sarah, welcome. Thank you for doing this.
Brad, thank you so much for having me.
We have a fun time every week, so I feel like we're going to have fun today. We have 10 questions, the same we do for everybody else, and 2 of them are standard. We start with one of those. Describe your job in 45 seconds.
Okay, well, I'm a geophysicist with the Bureau of Reclamation, like you mentioned. You can call me an engineering geophysicist, and basically my job is to use whatever geophysical tool I can to inform engineers about whatever question they come to me about with respect to dams, canals, spillways, or any of the surrounding area or materials needed for construction or modification of those dams that we have in our inventory. And we have probably over 400 dams in the western 17 states within the US that we are responsible for.
Do you feel like you are a bridge between the scientific and the engineering communities?
Yes, I do. No pun intended, since this is geotech. My job, actually, that's part of the whole reason why I went down the educational path that I did, so several of my half my degrees are in geotechnical engineering and half are in geology, geophysics, so that I could try to speak both languages and help either side understand the different questions and answers.
A noble pursuit. And so you represent the and or when I said geotechnical engineers and or geologists. Perfect. We ask a lot of nostalgia questions on Director's Cut as well. Sometimes we make you think all the way back to your youth. Sometimes it's about last week, as we will see here in a couple of minutes. This one, we're going to have you go relatively far back. What restaurant of your youth do you miss the most?
Oh man, it would definitely have to be the Monroe Diner. I grew up in Connecticut in a small town, and my friends and I, after every band competition, after every choral concert play, you could find us at the Monroe Diner because it was the only thing open past 10 o'clock. So,
did you have a standard order?
It was most likely something with French fries and a milkshake.
That's pretty good. I feel like at one point in my life, I had a goal, and viewers can comment on how sad this is, maybe. You remember those open-faced sandwiches that you could get at diners that had the gravy and everything? It was my life's mission to have an open-faced turkey sandwich in every state and province. And I made it to like 30 states at one point, which
wow,
I think says a lot about me, and it might not be that favorable what it says about me, but that's incredible. Was this a 24-hour place?
It was only open until 2 a.m., I think.
Were you ever there when it closed for the night?
100%.
That's what we like on Director's Cut. Sometimes we say there are no right answers and no wrong answers, but sometimes there are right answers, and that was the right answer. So I said we would ask a nostalgia question where you don't go back very far, and that's this next one. And this is always the research or practice question. You spent a couple weeks in a tunnel. You're currently working on a void detection project. You have to tell everybody about this because not everybody gets to say they spent a couple weeks in a tunnel.
It's funny. Yeah, when you contacted me earlier this month, it took me several days, I think, to get back to you because I was, without being funny, in a large irrigation tunnel in South Central Oregon. I was out there doing ground penetrating radar across as much of the tunnel that we could possibly do. This tunnel was over 3,000 feet long. And my job was, to scan as much of it as humanly possible in the 10 days that I was there. And I think we did more than 2,500 feet of it. And so we not only did the walls, but we also had to do the crown of the tunnel as well. So I think the tunnel was probably 12 feet tall and then 16 feet across. So it was quite the endeavor. I had to wear 2 harnesses, one a fall protection harness, and the other one was actually my ground penetrating radar harness, which allowed me to mount the computer system onto me and like hold the battery as well so that I could be more mobile as I worked up and across the wall and the ceiling. And it was definitely a learning opportunity because first of all, I've traditionally never worked in a tunnel before. I'm usually looking for tunnels. I'm not usually in the tunnels. But so we were scanning it because they're concerned about a lot of wear and tear, basically, and erosion. And they also just don't have really good information about what the infrastructure of the tunnel actually looks like. So I was mapping where all of the timber was, where there wasn't timber. And we're also looking for where the old original tunnel structure was. And what was the most unfortunate is probably the fact that I learned that I'm really allergic to spider webs.
Oh, wow.
Because the whole ceiling basically of this tunnel was just covered in cobwebs. So as you're scanning the ceiling, all of the cobwebs just come down on you. And so as we're moving across the tunnel, I just keep getting covered in spiders and cobwebs. And I looked like something out of a horror movie that my safety gear that I had to wear was so that I didn't inhale and eat like any spiders. So we had safety glasses on, hard hats. We had masks on because literally was covered. And it was definitely an endeavor.
So there are a lot of follow-up questions I could ask here, and many are technical, and we're not going to go with that because this is Director's Cut, and we ask the hard-hitting questions on here. So this is well over a half-mile long then. How disorienting was it to be in there for most of the day?
Oh, before going into the tunnel, I had really bad spatial awareness. But in the tunnel, I never knew where I physically was. The only reason we knew how far into the tunnel or how far out we needed to go was because there were bolts every 50 feet.
Oh.
And so they were just numbered. So it was like, this is bolt 16. And I would try to talk to them about what was north versus south or whatever. And even that got confusing for everybody because I worked with the local folks and this is their tunnel. And even they would get confused as to which way was north or which way was south or upstream, downstream. So there were definitely several times where we all had to stop work and orient ourselves to where we were, which direction we were even working in.
Well, we're glad you made it out.
I am too. It was really dark. I didn't realize how little sunlight I had gotten until probably I came home and I was like, it is so bright during the day. What is this?
Which is a great segue here to our next question, and it's about your study abroad in college. You went to a very sunny place, and that is Australia and
Yeah.
Tasmania specifically. What is your favorite memory of your semester in Tasmania?
Man, well, Tassie itself is a pretty special place in my heart. I was actually the first student from my university to go to Tasmania, so I started the study abroad program for my university there. But my favorite memory was probably I had my birthday while I was over there, and I took myself snorkeling in the Great Barrier Reef because it's like kind of a rite of passage being in the geosciences to go do that. So that was really fantastic. And that was probably, oh my God, that was in 2009. So that was almost 15 years ago.
So what was the most surprising thing to you about the Great Barrier Reef? I guess positively or negatively?
Well, so it's like there's sad parts and then there's like happy parts, right? So I think that the one of the most shocking things was about the bleaching that was already taken place across so much of the reef. You know, you see all these pictures about these bright, beautiful colors and everything. And unfortunately, some of the spots we went snorkeling were so horribly bleached already. But then there were some parts that was like night and day, like bright, beautiful, vibrant colored corals, the sea turtles, the like fish, and you could just like snorkel down in there and the like nobody, I mean the fish, like nobody, no fish like really cared that you were there. So that was like really amazing. We saw sea snakes, so you
Oh,
saw them
cool.
like slithering through the water, like yeah, it was unbelievable.
That is fantastic. And we're going to get to something else from your college days here, I think, in a little bit. What I wanted to ask you about, I don't often talk about other professional and technical societies on here. Usually I keep it just to GI, but I'm going to make an exception in your case. I think
Oh.
the way that we even first talked to each other, the way that we first met was talking about having the Society of Exploration Geophysicists participate in Geo-Congress, which ended up happening in 2022 in Charlotte.
Yep.
You've been active in leadership in your professional technical societies really relatively early in your career. I'm sure there are moments where you look around and you see the other volunteers are all quite a bit older than you are. What have you found to be the greatest benefit of this?
Honestly, I think the greatest benefit was the networking opportunities that I've had. So you're right. I became a student volunteer as an undergraduate. I first joined the American Geophysical Union and I became their student representative. And I kind of moved through multiple organizations depending upon who my advisor was. But just like, I think I don't like think about it a lot, but I think the coolest thing is the exposure to so many professionals throughout the different societies and like just the experiences that you get to have with them. Like I've sat on calls with some of these like professors. I used to only read their papers and now I like know them personally and can like just write them an email and say, hey, like I've got this opportunity, or do you have students you could send me, for example? I think just the ability to meet people, because even though geophysics is pretty niche, it does span far and wide. And that's fortunately, yeah, even brought me into the Geo-Institute, which I helped you start building that MOU agreement years ago. And it was very exciting when that went through.
We're happy to have you, and I'm happy that you mentioned AGU. I'm a former employee of AGU long, long ago, so I still have a little soft spot in my heart for the American Geophysical Union. So this kind of goes naturally into the next question too, which is the second one that we ask everybody when they come on the show, is how did you first get involved in ASCE and GI?
Well, it's definitely because I enrolled in an engineering graduate program. So I feel like that makes the most sense. But so I was actually pretty fortunate in my PhD years. One of my faculty members, Dr. Jihan, is actually pretty involved, I believe, with ASCE. He has been like a journal editor and is just really involved in like the geosynthetic side and stuff like that. And so he and my other professor, Dr. Robert Persons, both were really encouraging of me to participate, and it kind of helped like even give visibility to our university, which was really fun. So yeah, I think it was kind of like a mutual benefits. So like me being involved really helped me, and then it also helped like my classmates, because none of them I think were even considering doing like leadership roles within a professional society. And so I feel like a lot of students are often shocked when I tell them, oh yeah, I've got this committee meeting, or oh yeah, I'm chairing a session or something like that. Students are like, you can do that as a student? And I'm like, yeah, just ask. Like,
definitely shout out to Ji Han. He is current vice president of GI. He'll be president next year.
yeah.
And I'm sure he'll be watching this and be very happy that you wore your KU apparel today. There we go.
Rock chalk.
Excellent. So in doing the research for this interview, I also found out that you're a runner. We had a nice conversation before we started recording today, and found out that you don't like trails for pretty much the same reason that I do like them, which was fascinating. But you have lived in colder weather places than I have. And so I had to ask, what is the most extreme weather that you've been running in?
Well, I think the coldest I've ever run in was -10 degrees Fahrenheit. It was a short run, but it was a run basically to say that I did it, I guess. And it was very fun, I guess, in the moment, because you'd go out there all fresh and ready, and you'd come back and like your eyelashes were like frosted over. So many of my fellow runners, like, yeah, their beards would be frosted over. So I think that's the coldest and probably the most extreme. But I've definitely run through like torrential rain, and not on purpose. It's because
it's
happened.
Never on purpose.
Yeah, it's like you're out there on a 20-mile run and you're like, we thought we'd beat the rainstorm and we have 2 miles to go or something, and so you just slosh through it and you're just like, well, whatever, like it's fine.
Yeah, those are definitely not great moments. What is your favorite climate or favorite weather to go running in?
Well, I think it has to be sunny, or at least like lightly overcast. Actually, I ran a half marathon 2 weeks ago in Saguaro National Park, and that was actually beautiful running weather. It started in about like the mid 40s, and so it was just chilly at the start, but I was still out there in shorts and a t-shirt, and it was just beautiful weather because it was a dry heat, so you don't have that humidity bearing you down. But I've come to really love running in Colorado. Actually, I love the 40 to 50 degree weather here in the sunshine. So because if you're too hot, you just like hop in the shade under the tree, and it's like night and day difference.
And you got to plan for what you're going to feel like about 1 mile to 2 miles in. I've learned. I think that's a rookie mistake, is when you go out and you're too bundled up, and then you get going, and 5 minutes in you're burning up.
Yep.
45 degrees is not as cold as it seems when you're moving around.
Yeah.
So you've been in Connecticut, you're in Kansas, and you were doing some earthquake work. Seismic work, seismic research, seismic studies. How do you explain to people in places like Connecticut and Kansas that they should be concerned even a tiny bit about seismic activity?
Well, it's funny you say that. I was actually talking to someone the other day about how in college, so I did my undergraduate in Connecticut, and so in college I actually became known as Earthquake Girl. Because while I was in college, the Haiti earthquake happened in 2010, and it got a lot of press, probably because of the devastation, obviously. But so I was actually asked to give a campus-wide presentation with some of my other classmates where we actually educated the campus about why this earthquake was so devastating. And so I was on the front page of my school paper going like this, I think it was, where I was like talking about like plate tectonics, and we compared the Haiti earthquake to one of the famous California earthquakes, whether it was like Northridge or Loma Prieta or something. And so I don't know, it was very interesting because I feel like we were able to emphasize to them the importance of earthquakes, I think just as a general understanding, fortunately, because we were like, look at how this was so devastating. And then something that actually worked in my benefit was, I don't know if I can say benefit, but so then later in 2011 was the Mineral Virginia earthquake. Yeah. Which was like a 5.4, I think. And so that was right when I was starting.
Gotta get 5.9, give us some credit. It was much worse than the.
Okay. But like, I remember that because it was actually the week before my birthday that happened. And people were asking me about it because up in Connecticut, we felt it, and people felt it all the way up into Canada. And so it actually came at a really good time for me entering graduate school because it actually inspired the funding for my graduate degree at UConn, where I did some seismic hazard mapping in Connecticut, because it made people realize that a lot of our seismic hazard maps on the East Coast are out of date. And so they're like, this earthquake was all the way down in Virginia. Why are we feeling it here? And so like, these are important questions to be answered. So there've been a couple life events, I think, that have made people start to think about things. And then in Kansas, similarly, when I was in grad school in Kansas, there was a big earthquake just over the Oklahoma border, which was a similar magnitude. And again, we felt it all the way up in northeast Kansas, which is probably a 4-hour drive away. And people are like, how can we feel this earthquake? Like, what is it about intercontinental locations where we can feel them over great distances versus the East Coast, where the materials are a lot softer, a lot thicker? Like, why isn't it more widespread? So I think the more recent events that have been occurring and a lot of the press about them has what's been, I guess, helpful in trying to convey to people the importance of these events and why the geology is so important to why the devastation is or isn't what it is.
That's great. So for everybody out there, no matter where you live, look at your USGS maps, look at your seismic hazard maps, and then either be terrified or maybe relieved. I don't know, but mostly terrified, I guess.
Well, you can just look at the California Great Shakeout. They educate people on what to do during an earthquake. So. Yep.
Fantastic. Get under that door frame, as it were. Table also, yeah. Another nostalgia question for how we kind of wrap up with two, I guess. This one, I want you to think back to your first job, either after you got out of school, or it can be just your first overall job while you were in school. What lesson did you learn from your first boss that you still carry with you today?
Oh man, well, I'd say like my first real job was probably at the USGS when I was in undergrad, going through my first graduate degree. I had a really fantastic chief and mentor, Dr. John Lane, and he taught me, I think what the most important thing he taught me was to speak up. So as a geophysicist, as a woman in geophysics, a woman in engineering, there's not a lot of us in the discipline. I'm often the only woman in the room or in the field. And he taught me the importance of safety and the importance of speaking up about anything. So I think through graduate school with him, I grew confidence to ask more questions. Like if I didn't know an answer, I learned to just ask a question regardless of how self-conscious I may be about whether I was smart enough or not. But yeah, learning to speak up and especially speaking up about safety, because there can be a lot of mishaps that happen in the field. Yeah. And if you suspect something is unsafe, the only person looking out for you is yourself. So definitely speak up in those instances as well.
2 weeks in a tunnel could be much, much worse.
Yeah.
In an unsafe situation. Actually, a lot of things could be a lot worse, but I'm going to think of the tunnel here. I'm going to remember that one for quite a while, because I'm going to be really honest, that doesn't sound like a lot of fun to me. So,
we made a good time of it. And it was funny. I think the folks there I was working with told me that I'd officially spent more time in that tunnel than any of them ever had. So
we're going to wrap up with a fun one. But like I always say, they're all fun questions on Director's Cut. One thing that I found when I was doing my crack research before we did the interview is that you are a singer. Like, not like sometimes on a Friday night we'll hit that karaoke bar and get a little food kind of singer, like a real life singer. So with that in mind, what is your all-time favorite singing performance? Can be either the venue, either your personal performance, or both.
I think it would have to be. So I was fortunate enough in high school to be part of a select chamber choir, where we actually toured Italy. We were there for 12 days, and we did at least 4 different performances. And I think my favorite was St. Mark's Basilica in Venice. During Carnival was when we were there. So we actually were able to go into the Basilica and have a concert like during a normal church session. I don't know the word, sorry. But that I think was the most amazing thing, because it was our first performance of the trip. And so we did our warm up inside the Basilica. And so what we did was, as a choir, we just sang out one note. And then my director cut us off real fast, and you could just hear it resonate through the entire building. And it was honestly magical. It was just such a, wow, I hadn't thought about that in a really long time. I'm almost teary eyed thinking about that. So it was just magical.
And it really is fascinating to think about the construction methods and stuff that were used when those places were built. Some of these cathedrals are 1,500 years old, and the acoustics are absolutely incredible.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah. I think somebody captured a picture of it, and I still have it framed in my house.
That is very cool. And that is a great way to wrap it up. You made it through all 10 questions. You did a great job. We had a good time. For our viewers, I think you probably did too, because you're here at the end. But if you liked what you saw, remember to click like, subscribe, and get notifications. And yes, we will let you know every time we post something to the YouTube channel. Sarah, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much. I had a really fun time. Thank you so much.
I love Director's Cut. I mean, I guess I would stop if I didn't, so I don't really need to say that I love it, but it was a lot of fun today, and thanks for your thoughtful answers. And for all of our viewers, we will see you next week with another brand new episode of Director's Cut.